Here I am at the Mahle booth, and we've got, is that how I say it? Mahle?
Yeah, Mahle.
And we've got the VW Audi piston I was just shown here, the Volkswagen piston. Can you tell me a little bit about why Mahle is the better piston, or why we should go with the forged piston, or whatever you'd have to say about it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits that you get going from the forged or the OEM cast to the forged. Of course, in just material properties, the casting will have prone to failures because it's not as strong material-wise. A forging is a lot stronger, and so just upgrading to a forged piston, you're going to have, you can run more power, it can handle more abuse, etc. But there's a lot of things that we do to this piston that isn't just based on any forged piston. So we have a top anodized top ring groove, so that helps with especially with turbo cars settling that top ring. Our forged pistons also come with the anti-friction Grafal coating, and then what makes them great, it's probably the number one question that we get, is a phosphate dry lubricant coating. So what a phosphate dry lubricant coating helps with is that on initial startup, when there's not necessary oil pressure into the engine, it helps with initial startup, the dry lubricant does. So Mahle has a lot of background into these. One thing that really helps us out is that for OEM, when the OEM producer is Mahle, we get to use a lot of the OEM data and the OEM research into the design of these aftermarket forged pistons. So that's what really helps us out in the Volkswagen scene, especially.
And Mahle's a German company, is that right?
Yes, yeah, Mahle's a German company. Mahle Motorsports, this is a United States division of Mahle Motorsports, but yeah, Mahle is a German company.
You were showing me that this has different rod sizes for...
Yeah, so right here, looking at starting down right here, the 2006 to 2009 2.0, you're looking at, this is a 20 millimeter pin, and then you go down to the 2010 and up, and then you're at the 21 millimeter pin, and then you're going even further to the 23 millimeter pin. And all these are M142P alloy. So M142P alloy is a Mahle specific alloy. It's different than 4032 and 2618, but it takes the good characteristics of both of them and implement them in one. So it has the characteristics of 4032 and expansion, so it doesn't expand very much, but it has the strength and durability of 2618 to where you can really put a lot of power into it and it can hold up.
So we've got the rings right here, and what I was explaining, or I have before in the past, is the oil consumption with the OEM pistons. First you had the pinholes in this oil control ring, and then they went to the slots, but all of these are going to have the waffle, is that right?
Yeah.
Waffle style ring?
It'll be a three-piece ring, three-piece oil ring.
And these rings obviously come with the pistons, but you have to fit them yourself, or you have to gap them?
So it depends on your application, but they will come with the piston. Our kits come with the piston, rings, piston pin, and circlips, so it's a full kit. For rings, it's all about your application. If you're going to be, really racing it, or is it turbo, is it NA, is it supercharged, etc. But we actually come with a ring kit to tell you what you're wanting to do. So like here, for example, these are ring gap instructions.
And this will come with the piston in the box?
Yes, yeah. These ring gap instructions will come with the piston in the box. So this will give you a guide on what you want to gap your rings to.
Like for instance, you want to make sure that you put them on correctly up. What side of the ring is up and down. And
yeah, so that's that can lead to oil consumption issues if you put the rings on incorrectly. But yeah, we always like to mark them with a dot or an M and just place that on the top, facing upward. So
when you put the rings on,
the orientation of them.
Yeah, the orientation.
So it's always good. It's always a good pre-measure to have the orientation guideline that we use, but in all reality, the rings are, they're rotating while the engine is running.
That's what I was
the chances of them all lining up their gaps, it could happen, but if any pre-measure that we can take before we assemble the engine or while we're assembling the engine, we want to take. So yeah, we do have an orientation to where you pretty much just want to, you're putting your top ring in gap, at this angle, go 90 degrees, put your second ring in gap, and then go like another 90 or 180 degrees and put your oil control ring gaps, etc. right there. So.
I've seen some people take a brush and oil and brush the oil on when they're about ready to install it. And I use an oil squirt gun and I just squirt the oil on. Would there be a way that you would suggest oiling the pistons or what oil to put on them before install?
The only thing, anything on metal, anything that's touching, make sure it's oil. That's really just the guideline on that. So make sure you oil your rings. Make sure you put oil. But it doesn't really matter if you're applying it with a brush or a gun, a squirt gun. So, yeah.
And then it doesn't necessarily matter if you put the factory rods back. Obviously, aftermarket rods are stronger, but these pistons work perfect as long as you get the correct wrist pin size. Then you can put the factory rods back on these pistons. But then the weight of this piston might be slightly different. These might be slightly heavier.
The weight of the piston is probably. It's more likely different than the OEM. So just making sure that everything's in balance. Just a good pre-measure, like I said, a good pre-measure to do before you assemble your engine. We're taking each step, cautionly, so we're not gonna mess up something.
Now, I've put aftermarket pistons in before, and I'm sure they've been a different weight, and I never noticed any kind of imbalance. For most people, will they need to go through that to balance? This isn't necessarily a race performance. Are they going to need to balance and blueprint their engine?
So it's kind of based on application. Are you gonna, is it a, high horsepower, super, trying to break records, or are we just trying to get it back on the road type of thing? And it's all about, it's kind of what your preference is on that, on the application wise. And it'd always be a good term to do to measure out each piston and at least try to get them as balanced as oriented, from front to back at least. So like, if you're putting in rods, this rod might be heavier, versus the, bores. So, you can kind of try to balance your engine out that way as well. But for an OEM rebuild, you get it back on the road, you probably, I'm not saying 100% would be okay to just put in that, but you can balance it. Like I say, you can balance it with the aftermarket stuff that you're getting. So like if you have a heavier rod, lighter piston, you can put those two together versus, a heavy rod, heavy piston out of the set, if that makes sense.
From my experience, I hadn't noticed a difference. Most people probably in a factory OEM, if they're just trying to fix oil consumption, they probably won't notice a difference, you think?
Yeah, probably not.
I've also noticed that on the factory OEM pistons, this ringland right here can break loose and scratch the piston walls, destroy your engine altogether. And that's one of the benefits of having a forged piston as well.
Yeah. So the material, like I said, we went over the material that a forged is a lot stronger than a casting. And then this M142 is on the upper end of the forging. So like M142 and 2618, they're stronger than a 4032 forging. And these are M142. So, having a thickness right there and also with a better material, you shouldn't worry about, that failure right there. It's not going to happen with a forged piston.
I can't remember. Do you know how long Mahle's been around making pistons?
102 years.
Wow, they've been in the game since practically the beginning.
Yeah.
So they know what they're doing with the engineers and research and development. Another thing that I've seen, and the reason why you would want to replace the pistons rather than just replacing the piston rings is this wear liner skirt. Do you have any information on that?
It's a padding, really and truly, because once you go through this padding and it's aluminum on that, then that has a chance of getting aluminum into your oil, and then if it's not caught in the oil filter, then you can get that aluminum into your bearing, etc. There is a thickness to this, so you're increasing your piston wall too when you put that back in there. Probably not enough to show any weird wear signs, but it's just something to be mindful of. If we're trying to minimize the chances of something happening, and if you want to minimize, you want to take all the actions to minimize something wrong happening. Have the piston, have the skirt coating on there, or buy new OEMs or buy a forged piston with correct tolerances, etc. And do it right, I guess.
Is there a benefit on going with Mahle versus some other aftermarket forged piston?
So this isn't my words. This is kind of just going based off of what I hear every day, working with customers, and the quality is superb overall, and also just we're able to help you out. But the quality of maybe not people that are just rebuilding for OEM standards that just want to get it running again. They don't see it, but the high-end engine builders, they see when they're blueprinting their whole engine, they see it every single day of. If they're 1 inch 100 compression height and they're measuring these pistons, they know it's 1 inch 100 compression height. Everything is machined to high tolerance. We do some extreme, like I said, we do some extreme engineering into it, design behind it, that other manufacturers don't have the experience or the money, to be honest, or like I said, we have the OEM designs of this. OEMs put a lot of money into research and design. So having the OEM data, etc., really helps us and puts us a leg above some OEM.
And you've got all these factory applications, like for instance, we got a BMW 4-liter, and all these are labeled here. Acura VTEC, already ready to go in all these different engines. Are there any common mistakes that someone can do?
Yeah. So one of the most common mistakes is installing your rings the wrong way. So, for example, like we said in the ring instructions, we'll have an M or a dot on top of the ring, and the M or dot will face upwards, so it'll be facing upwards on the piston. Make sure those are installed correctly. Your oil control ring, there will be an end on that expander. It's the middle ring on that. Make sure that's not overlapping. It has to be buttoned up against each other on the ends. Although installing your rings correctly or incorrectly will just lead to oil consumption. There's a lot of things that can lead to that. Just it's an easy mistake because we've seen high-end engine builders do it, but it's an easy thing to look over. So make sure those are installed correctly. Another one that can lead to a catastrophic engine failure is the circlip. So there's a circlip groove right here that you'll after you put your pin in, you install the circlip, the final circlip. You really want to make sure that circlip is fully installed and really seated in there, because if not, the circlip will come out and the pin will start walking out, and then it's a 50-mile or less catastrophic engine failure that will happen.
Do you have a suggestion on where to put the gap on that circlip? Is there anything about that?
Actually, yes. So it really only depends. For OEM rebuilds, it's pretty much fine. One of the things is you really want the circlip. You don't want the gap to be in that gap to where you're trying to dig it out,
right,
just for future occurrences. But to really help it out, if you can do it either thinking about inertia and lifting the circlips out, if you can put it either 0 or a 180, then that's probably the best thing for it. But it doesn't really have to be, not for any crazy high horsepower.
What about people popping out their old circlips or their old pistons, and instead of putting in the new ones that are with the pistons, putting in the old ones?
Never reuse circlips.
Never reuse circlips.
Even if we have a proper, so on our...
Might even be different size, right?
Yeah, it could be.
Different tensions.
Yeah, and also they're super cheap. I mean, circlips are like $2. I mean, it shouldn't be something you want to reuse, but never reuse circlips. We also have a proper circlip installation. You don't want to use pliers and try to grip them down and insert them. We have a YouTube video on Mahle Motorsports YouTube to how to insert circlips, but if you accidentally damage a circlip trying to do installation, just stop and go buy some more and install them. But yeah, never reuse any damage or use circlips.
Thank you so much for all the info. You've been extremely helpful, and I'll be trying out a set of these Mahle pistons.